She burst out of the tall summer grass. There was blood on her dress. Fear burned in her eyes. For a heartbeat, even the Kansas wind seemed to stop. She ran like hell had reached up from the prairie to drag her back. Her white dress was torn. Her hair stuck to her face. She kept looking over her shoulder like someone was close enough to breathe down her neck. Her name was Lily Hart, 24. Small, quick, tougher than she looked, but not tough enough to outrun a man like Clayton Reed. Most men in Dodge City said Clayton was born with a silver spoon. Others said the spoon was stolen. Either way, he was the kind of rich cattle baron who believed anything he wanted was already his, including Lily. And on this day, he had finally pushed her far enough to make her run. The sun beat down on her like fire. The prairie was so quiet she could hear her own pulse. Then came the sound that nearly dropped her to her knees. A rifle crack behind her. Sharp. Mean. Close. The bullet grazed her hip and sent her tumbling into the dirt. She hit hard. Dust exploded. Her breath ripped out of her chest, but she pushed up on shaking arms and kept crawling. She did not cry. She did not scream. Every inch of her body said quit, but her will said no. Up ahead, she spotted a line of fence posts, a shed, a cabin, smoke rising from a forge. Someone lived there. Someone who might help. Someone who might at least scare Clayton off long enough for her to stand on her own feet again. She did not know if anyone in Kansas was brave enough to stand up to him, but right then she was willing to bet her life on a stranger. She dragged herself through the dust until her hands hit hay scattered across a ranch yard. Her vision blurred, the world spun. And then she saw him. Sawyer Briggs, 50 years old, broad shoulders, gray in his beard, sunburned skin, a rancher who also worked iron for half the county. He was sitting beside a bale of hay with a hammer still in his hand, a man who looked like he had been carved from the land itself. He stood the moment he saw her fall. He crossed the yard with slow, steady steps, the kind of steps that belonged to a man who feared nothing. She tried to push herself upright. She tried to warn him that Clayton was close. All she managed was a whisper. "Please, help me." Sawyer knelt beside her. His eyes narrowed as he saw the blood soaking through the fabric near her hip. He pressed a hand near the wound, and Lily gasped in pain, but she did not pull away. Not this time. Not when her life balanced on a blade. She had no idea if this man was a saint or a fool, only that he was the first person standing between her and Clayton. He looked toward the horizon where dust rose from Clayton's riders. Then he looked back at her, his face unreadable. And here's the question that will decide everything to come. Can a man who wants nothing to do with trouble save a woman who brings nothing but... Sawyer lifted Lily like she weighed no more than a sack of feed and carried her into the shade beside the forge. The heat coming off that furnace felt like standing in front of the gates of hell, but somehow it made her shivering worse. He set her down gently on a bed of clean hay and reached for the bottle of whiskey he kept near the anvil. She tried to swat his hand away, but she was too weak and the motion barely stirred the dust. "Easy now. You drink this, or you bleed out." His voice was calm, steady, like nothing in the world could hurry him. Lily took a sip and coughed hard. The burn hit her throat like a punch. She wiped her mouth and glared at him. "I did not come here to get patched up by some stranger." She said it like she meant every word, but her hands trembled. Sawyer raised a brow. "You came here because you ran out of road." Then he pushed aside the torn fabric near her hip and saw the bullet lodged deep in swollen skin. He let out a long breath. "This has to come out now. If I wait, you will lose the whole leg." Lily jerked upright. Her eyes went wide. "What are you planning to do to me?" Her voice cracked. Not from fear of him, but fear of pain. Sawyer pulled a hunting knife from the forge, and the blade smoking from the heat. He wiped it once on a clean cloth and said, "The bullet is close to the surface. I need to open the skin a little, just enough to get it out. It will sting bad, but it will save your life. Folks out here have been doing it this way since before Kansas had a name. Then I stop the bleeding before it takes you. Out here, the difference between living and dying was often just one stubborn man who dared to try." She stared at the smoking knife. Her breathing hitched. Every muscle in her body tightened. Then came the line that slipped out of her without warning. "Wait, you were putting that inside me." Sawyer did not even blink. "It will be over quick. Now hold still or this goes bad fast." She tried to push away. Her boot scraped the dirt. Her hands curled into fist. She'd been running for hours and fighting for days, and now her strength was gone. But not her pride, not her fire. She looked him square in the eye as if daring him to hurt her. "Do it then. But if you kill me, I am haunting you till you die." Sawyer almost smiled. Almost. Then he pressed the hot blade toward her wound as the wind carried the distant thunder of hooves rolling across the prairie. And right when the metal touched her skin, Lily heard something that made her heart stop cold. Clayton was closer than anyone guessed. So what happens when the man she fears most reaches the ranch before the bullet leaves her body? Once the cut was open, Sawyer reached for a short iron rod he kept by the coals, its tip glowing faintly in the forge light. The hot metal touched Lily's skin, and she let out a sound that was half gasp and half fury. Sawyer pressed down, steady, not cruel, just a man who had done this sort of thing too many times to flinch now. The hot metal hissed as it met torn flesh. Lily grabbed a fistful of his shirt and held on like she was hanging off a cliff. Her breath came in sharp bursts. The pain was blinding, white and mean, but the moment she thought she would pass out, she heard something outside. The slow grind of wagon wheels, the clop of horses, low voices. Clayton's men were close enough that Sawyer stiffened before she did. For the first time that day, Lily understood that this stranger might be the one who paid the price for her running. "Do not stop," she whispered through gritted teeth. "If he catches me like this, I am done." Sawyer did not look up. Not yet. He kept the tool steady as sweat rolled down his temples. He pushed deeper. The sound that came out of Lily was sharp enough to split wood, but she stayed still. She forced herself to. Her fingers dug into his arm hard enough to leave marks. "There it is," Sawyer muttered. "Bullet is turning. Hold on." Sawyer's hand brushed her waist as he steadied her, and for a strange second, Lily felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the forge fire. A shout came from outside, a man's voice, deep, cold. "Clayton Reed? Sawyer Briggs? You got something that belongs to me. Bring her out, and no one gets hurt." Lily's heart slammed hard against her ribs. Sawyer finally looked up at her, just for a second, but that second felt like a whole decision being made in his eyes. He braced her hip with one hand and drove the tool in with the other. The bullet shot free and clattered onto the dirt. Lily gasped like she had been underwater too long. Sawyer grabbed a wad of clean cloth and pressed it to her wound. His voice dropped low. "You can stand for a minute, right? Because if Clayton walks through that door, you better be standing, or you better be ready to fight." Lily pushed herself upright. Her legs shook like a newborn colt, weak but stubborn. She tasted iron in her mouth. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She was not done yet. Outside, the footsteps grew heavier, closer. Clayton called out again, at this time louder. "Briggs, you got one chance to hand over the girl." "Do you hear me?" Sawyer stood, picked up his hammer, and nodded toward the doorway. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but he had lived too long to let fear make his choices for him. Lily swallowed hard, her pulse hammered. They both knew what came next would decide everything. Some folks get to choose their battles, but for Lily and Sawyer, this one had kicked the door in and made itself at home. And just before Clayton's shadow filled the doorway, let me ask you something. If you were Sawyer, would you hand her over, or would you risk your life to keep her safe? If you want to hear what happens next, feel free to subscribe so you do not miss the next part of this story. And while you are here, grab a warm drink, settle in, and tell me, what time is it for you, and where are you listening from? Clayton stepped into the doorway like he owned the whole prairie. Dust clung to his boots. Sweat streaked his collar. Two men stood behind him with their rifles ready. He scanned the room slow, almost lazy, until his eyes landed on Lily standing beside Sawyer with that blood-soaked cloth pressed to her hip. "Well, look at that," he said with a half-smile. "I ride all the way out here and find my bride hiding in another man's barn." Lily stiffened. Sawyer did not move a muscle. He just shifted his weight like a bull about to charge. Clayton pointed at her. "Come here right now. Do you hear me?" Lily shook her head. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "I am not yours. Not now. Not ever." Clayton laughed, a deep, ugly sound that made the hair on her arms rise. He waved at Sawyer with a flick of his hand. "Briggs, this is simple. You step aside, I take the girl, and we all go home. No trouble." Sawyer slid one boot forward, just one, but it was enough to change the air in that room. "You shot her," he said quietly. "You chased her across half the prairie, and you think I am letting you walk out with her? Not happening." Clayton's smile dropped. "Trouble it is then." The first gunshot cracked so loud the forge rattled. Clayton's hired hand fired too soon, too wild. Sawyer lunged, grabbed the heavy iron ladle beside the anvil, and swung it hard. The blow hit the rifle clean out of the man's grip. The gun clattered across the floor. Lily stumbled back against the hay, but stayed standing, her pulse hammered. But she refused to fall. Clayton grabbed her arm. He yanked so hard she cried out. Sawyer turned fast, grabbed Clayton by the collar, and slammed him against the wooden beam with a force that rattled the tools hanging nearby. Clayton spat blood and hissed, "You think you can steal from me? You think you can take what is mine?" Sawyer leaned in close. "She is not an object, and she damn sure is not yours." The second hired man raised his rifle, aiming at Sawyer's back. Lily saw it first. Her breath caught. She knew that in one more heartbeat the whole fight could end with a death, maybe Sawyer's and maybe hers. So she did the only thing she had left in her. She grabbed the nearest thing she could reach, not to fight like a soldier, just to swing enough to break his aim. Her body shook hard, but she lifted the iron with a quick, desperate jerk. And now, here's the moment that decides everything. Will Lily swing that iron and save Sawyer? Or will Clayton's bullet end the story right here? Lily did not wait for fear to catch up with her. She swung the iron with every ounce of strength she had left. The sound cracked through the barn like a church bell. The rifleman dropped to his knees, dazed, the gun slipping from his hands as dust swirled around him. Clayton froze just long enough for Sawyer to wrench free and shove him back against the post. For the first time all day, the danger in that barn felt like it might finally be tipping their way. The two men locked eyes, both breathing hard, the air thick with smoke from the forge and the heat of anger. Clayton swung first, wild and sloppy, but Sawyer moved like a man who had survived too many rough years to be taken down by another bully. One solid punch and Clayton hit the dirt. The barn went quiet. In that thin slice of silence, every breath felt louder, like the day was still deciding who it was going to let walk away. Only the forge cracked softly in the corner. Lily stood there, the iron tool shaking in her hands, but there was a fire in her eyes now, a steady one, a new one. She had not just survived, she had fought back. Sawyer moved to her side and took the iron gently from her fingers. He looked at her with something close to pride. "You saved my life." His voice was calm, but she could hear the truth in it. And for the first time since she ran from Clayton, Lily felt her heart steady. Clayton groaned in the dirt. His men helped him up, their own courage broken. He glared at Lily like he wanted to burn her whole world down, but Sawyer stepped between them. His voice low, slow, and final. "She is done with you. Ride out and do not come back." Clayton pushed himself up, wiping blood from his mouth. His eyes burned with fury, not fear. "This is not done, Briggs. I am coming back with every man I have." Sawyer stepped forward just enough to make him stop talking. "Then you better bring a preacher too." Clayton backed away slow, not defeated, just planning. And somehow that made the air feel colder than before. Lily let out a long breath she had been holding for days. Her shoulders sank. All the fight seemed to drain out of her at once. Sawyer caught her before she fell. Not like a hero, not like a man claiming something. Just a human being who refused to let someone break in front of him. He settled her near the forge and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You stood up today. Most folks spend their whole life waiting for someone else to save them, but you saved yourself. Never forget that." Lily looked at the glowing fire and whispered, "I thought I was running because I was weak." Sawyer shook his head. "Running toward freedom is not weakness. It is the first step toward becoming who you were meant to be. And that is the part most folks forget. Sometimes the world tries to decide your worth before you ever get the chance. Sometimes you only learn your strength when someone tries to take it from you." As the sun set over the Kansas fields, Lily finally felt the weight lift from her chest, not because she was safe, but because she had taken control of her own story. When the last light slipped behind the hills, Lily realized her wound did not hurt as much anymore. What scared her more was not knowing where to go next. Freedom had sounded big and shiny in her head. Out here in the cooling dust, it just felt like a road with no map. Sawyer walked to the fence and saddled his second horse, the old black gelding he rarely used. He looked at her with calm, steady eyes and said, "Come on, night gets cold out here. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where you had to fight for your own freedom? A moment where you finally said enough is enough?" If this story touched something in you, feel free to like the video and subscribe so you do not miss the next tale. Before you go, take a deep breath with me for a moment. And while you're here, tell me in the comments what time it is for you and where in the world you're listening from. I would love to know your side of the story.